Chapter 21, Section 21. Two Demon Slayer Corps members stood by. Flower Pillar. At the sound of footsteps behind them, the two turned and looked at the approaching Flower Pillar with expressions of admiration. There's still one survivor over there, but he suffered a severe psychological shock. I'll leave the rest to you then, Butterfly Kanai said with a gentle smile. Yes, the two answered in unison. They nodded briefly toward Sanemi Shinazugawa and followed the direction Kanai pointed. Let's go as well. After the two figures disappeared into the night, Kanai turned back. Given what they were about to do, she needed a secluded place to prevent any accidents. Right, she said. Sanemi Shinazugawa didn't argue. He reached down, lifted Yowamushi, and tore a strip of cloth from Yowamushi's clothing to cover his mouth and eyes. He understood his role clearly. He was a tool for this operation. Whatever Kanai decided, he would follow. In the past, that would have been unthinkable. Sanemi respected no one in the Corps but Kagaya Ubuyashiki. He acknowledged the pillars, but he didn't follow orders without question. This matter, however, was too important. He controlled his temper and moved at Kanai's pace. They quickly left the town and entered a forest. Mr. Shinazugawa, please stand a little farther back, Kanai said after a moment's thought. The warning in the chat group had made her certain this was extremely dangerous. Keeping others at a distance might prevent anything contagious or explosive from spreading. Sanemi frowned, briefly tempted to ask if she didn't trust him, but Kanai's expression was entirely serious. He swallowed his irritation and ran off until he was over 100 meters away. Kanai didn't ask him to go further. She didn't know what a safe distance would be, but it was certainly better than standing beside her. Kanai took a steadying breath and produced the small glass bottle she had stored after the chat group session that afternoon. The bright red liquid inside shimmered faintly. At a glance, it looked like ordinary human blood. One of the chat group members, Doma Umaru, had commented in the stream, "Is this Natsume's blood? It looks like a normal person's." The audience had settled somewhat after the earlier shock, though those horrific images kept popping into people's minds. They were all curious about what would happen next. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Butterfly Kanai opened the bottle and knelt by Yowamushi. She untied the cloth over his mouth and slowly tipped the bottle. Yowamushi, who had been saving his strength for an escape, froze. He smelled an unfamiliar metallic tang of blood, different from the scent of the two pillars, and before he could react, a single drop slipped into his mouth. Chapter 22, Terrifying Effect. The moment the blood touched his tongue, it flowed inside him and began to spread. In a place hidden from view, a dark spot formed and expanded like ink dropped into water, moving with a speed you could see. The demon's own regenerative power surged to fight it, but it was utterly ineffective. It was as if the wounded part simply stopped healing, pale, dead, and spreading. "Ah!" Yowamushi screamed, a raw, agonized sound. His eyes widened under the cloth, his mouth opened to reveal cold, sharp teeth, and his body writhed on the ground, though he had no legs to stand on. The pain was immediate and fierce. Kanai was startled by how rapidly the effect unfolded. She instinctively leapt back a few steps, her brows knitting as she observed, needing to record what happened while staying close enough to monitor it. A spreading blackness crawled across Yowamushi's flesh. A faint black smoke rose from it and began to eat away at his clothes. His calloused skin and iron-hard bones offered no resistance. There was no momentary reprieve. Within seconds, his body had turned into something like charred coal. A gust of night wind tore through the trees, and the charcoal disintegrated into fine dust that blew away. Not a scrap of skin, not a sliver of bone remained, nothing to show that he had ever existed. The effect went far beyond what anyone had expected. They had assumed, at worst, a rotten corpse would be left behind. None had imagined absolute annihilation. Everyone watching the live stream went silent. Even Natsume Yuu himself hadn't anticipated that his blood could have such a terrifying result. From where he stood, Sanemi's eyes widened and a dry gulp escaped him. The stoic man, usually fearless, felt a chill run down his spine. Kanai's face was stunned for only a heartbeat before she reacted. She sprang forward and produced a long cloth from her sleeve, the same kind of cloth she'd used to wrap up for the breathing technique earlier. With a sharp flick, the cloth spread out and scooped up the drifting ashes before they could scatter. A second flick rolled the cloth back, trapping the ashes inside. She held the bundle and felt as if it were burning hot to the touch. If whatever effect had reduced a demon to dust could contaminate the ashes, the consequences would be catastrophic. That was why she had to gather them immediately. What is this? Doma Umaru's voice cracked through the channel. Even he, who knew the origin of the blood, couldn't hide his panic. One drop had reduced a near-immortal demon to dust in seconds, something neither a Nichiren blade nor sunlight could achieve. Chapter 22, Section 22. Kato Megumi's face, usually composed, went pale. Is something this dangerous flowing through Yu's body? It had been only a single drop of blood, and yet it had made a demon, one that hadn't even flinched when its limbs were severed, scream in agony. If that much pain could come from a single drop, what must Natsume Yuu be enduring with his whole body full of it? Megumi pressed a hand to her chest, feeling a faint, aching sympathy for him. Shitanda Eru covered her mouth with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "You, are you really okay?" She was distraught at the thought that someone she knew had been enduring that kind of pain, and frustrated that she couldn't help. Her anger even reached the god who had put Yuu through it. "I'm sorry. I can't help at all." Butterfly Kane clenched her fists, eyes burning with unwillingness. From a family of pharmacists and with dreams of studying medicine to help others, she hated feeling powerless. She couldn't save people attacked by demons, and now, even with a friend suffering, she had no remedy. "What's the point of studying medicine?" she muttered, hiding her face in her bangs. Yu looked at them all and smiled wryly. "You guys..." Their worry was more intense than concern over the blood's lethality. He felt both exasperated and genuinely moved. "After I gained the demon's power just now, my regeneration improved even more," he said. "Things are headed in the right direction. Don't worry too much." He offered what comfort he could, though he knew words were thin against what they had seen. "Flower Pillar, can I come over now?" A voice called from the distance, Sanemi Shinazugawa, impatient even as he tried to sound respectful. "Wait a moment, let me check everything first," Yu replied. Kanae, steadied by Yu's calm and Sanemi's interruption, took a deep breath and walked to where Yowamushi had dissipated. She examined the ground carefully. "It doesn't look like it spreads," Yu said. Chitanda's eyes widened with immediate curiosity. "There are so many illnesses. Some are contagious. Why do you think this won't be?" Yu pointed out what he'd noticed. "Look at the grass. The demon corroded clothes and organic stuff, but the grass underneath wasn't affected at all." "Really?" Doma Umaru chimed in from the chat. Chitanda knelt and pointed at the blades of grass. "Except for where the demon crushed them, everything's fine. It's suspicious that it can corrode clothes, but not the grass underneath." "That makes sense," Butterfly Kanai agreed, then glanced at the unharmed package in her hand. Yu continued, "More importantly, everyone around me is fine. Maybe it's restricted to me as the target. Maybe it doesn't aim to destroy everything." "To be safe," Yu added, "that's just my opinion. You should test it once you have the ashes in hand." The scene they had just witnessed was too terrifying to take risks. "Okay," Kanai said, nodding, and after double-checking the area and confirming she felt no ill effects, she stood and called towards Sanemi. "You can come over now." Sanemi didn't delay. He barreled in like a gust of wind, nearly at top speed, and when he stopped, the surrounding grass bent from the force of his arrival. What an incredible thing," he breathed, still trying to process it up close. Turning to Kanai with an eager intensity, he asked, "Even a lower moon? They're usually a problem for most Demon Slayer Corps members, but this turned one to ash in moments. Could we use this against Kibutsuji Moon directly?" Kanai shook her head gently, not wanting to feed false hopes. The difference in strength between a lower moon and an upper moon is huge, and it's the same between an upper moon and Muzen. Their regeneration scales that way too. That's why you need careful, thorough preparation. She glanced around, thinking of what she knew. When Muzen used his full power, even the pillars would struggle. Maybe only the stone pillar and the flame pillar might survive a moment of it. The upper moons were no joke either. Without the Demon Slayer mark activated, even the pillars would likely need at least 2 people cooperating just to stall one. And their core wasn't in a future where every pillar was at peak strength. Currently, they had only 5 pillars present: stone, sound, flame, flower, and wind. Even if this blood could fell one upper moon, there would still be other upper moons and Muzan himself. And the more they relied on this blood, the more prepared enemies would become. The first thing a demon would do when pierced would be to cut off the affected part and regenerate it. They couldn't afford missteps. If Muzan was to be eradicated, they had to be even more cautious than in later battles. Sanemi's excited expression faded into concern as he understood the implications. "They're really that strong," he said quietly. From the chat, Doma Umaru offered an idea. "Since Muzan's been searching for the blue spider lily, could we hide Yu's blood inside one?" Kanai considered it. The idea had merit. If they used the blue spider lily as a container, Muzan might be caught off guard. But it was risky. "It's a good idea," she admitted, "but we don't know exactly when the lily will bloom. And if Muzan eats the blue spider lily, there's a chance he could complete his evolution before the poison, or whatever effect we hope for, can take him down." Sanemi, nearby, saw Kanai speaking to the chat and understood. He stayed silent and watched closely. Yu added another concern. Given Muzan's cautious personality, he'd probably take a sample to study first. Also, the blood's properties are preserved by the chat group's storage. Without that preservation, the blood might degrade over time if exposed to air. Kanai nodded. The idea had potential, but the risks and the unknowns were too great to gamble on. They needed a plan that didn't rely on lucky timing or hope. The stakes were too high to leave anything to chance. Chapter 23. Muzan's Fear. Chapter 23. Section 23. Would the sickness inside disappear as well? Doma Umaru trailed off, swallowing the thought about passing off ordinary spider lilies as blue ones. Phew. There's still so much to prepare and think about. "You all should get some rest. You have school tomorrow," Butterfly Kanai sighed, smiling gently at the live stream. "Ah, it's already this late," Doma Umaru said. "Looks like I'll be dozing off tomorrow," Kato Megumi muttered. "Sleeping in class is not allowed." "Well then, good night, everyone," Chitanda Eru gently reminded them. "Good night," Natsume Yuu answered. After the farewells, Butterfly Kanai closed the stream. She and Sanemi Shinazugawa lingered, though, waiting until dawn, and only leaving once they were sure nothing unusual remained. Infinity Castle. A woman in a kimono, with flawless makeup distorted by rage, filled the room with an abyssal aura. Her red eyes flashed crimson. Her slitted pupils stared coldly downward. Opposite her, 11 figures knelt on one knee. The killing intent radiating from the woman was so intense that several of them broke out in cold sweat. Their backs were drenched before they knew it. Every one of them could feel Muzan's fury, as if it would reach out and tear them apart in the next breath. Not one dared make a sound. Only a man with rainbow-colored eyes remained relaxed, smiling as he surveyed the room. Lower Moon 3 is dead. After a long silence, Kibutsuji Muzan finally spoke. Only a Lower Moon 3? Kokushibo and the other upper moons were stunned. They had expected something far worse from the way Muzan had appeared. Lower moons were replaceable, consumables compared to the centuries-long status of the upper moons. Even when lower moons had died before, Muzan had not reacted like this. But his death was very strange, Muzan continued, his voice tightening. It carried a power like a curse that tried to cling to the link between me and him. Muzan's features warped further. His body trembled slightly. In his snake-like pupils there flickered a fear the others could not read. Chapter 24. A Chasm That Effort Cannot Cross. The link with Muzan-sama? Those below exchanged confused looks. They understood the physical link. They had Muzan's blood in their bodies and were bound to him. But this was different. This was an invisible, intangible connection. How could a power cling to such a thing? Neither the lower nor the upper moons could grasp it, nor could Muzan himself. The power surpassed his comprehension, a silent, deathly omen steeped in despair, something that ought not to exist. Muzan was certain that if that power touched him, he would die. His regeneration, multiple hearts, and many heads would be useless. He would be destroyed. So before that power could reach him, he severed the link with Yowamushi and returned straight to the Infinity Castle. He waited, tense and careful. When nothing came, he breathed a short relief, then summoned all the upper and lower moons. He did not reveal the depth of his fear. He only gave the facts. "Can you tell what happened?" Duma asked, his crystal-bright eyes glittering with curiosity. "No." Muzan's reply was clipped. "After I cut the connection, I received no information about what happened to Yowamushi." Muzan's eye twitched. More than the loss of a subordinate, it was the lack of knowledge that gnawed at him. Not knowing what had occurred filled him with a cold, furious dread. If the Demon Slayer Corps, or anyone hostile to him, obtained that power, it would threaten his very existence. "Be more restrained in your actions for now," he ordered, voice hard. "Investigate the last place Yowamushi appeared. I must know precisely what happened." His pupils flashed a deep crimson as he spoke. The others responded in unison. "Yes." "Speed up the search for clues about the blue spider lily," someone added. "Yes, you may leave." With a motion of his hand, Muzan dismissed the 11. The sound of a boa accompanied their disappearance. Muzan settled down, his frown deepening. The first time he had felt that power, he had tempted himself to hide, but he had stopped. Hiding meant that if humans discovered and mastered that power while he stayed away, his future would only grow bleaker. He could not afford to cower. Elsewhere, the demon moons reacted in their own ways. In the eternal paradise faith, Duma lounged across a bed, a gentle smile on his lips but emptiness in his eyes. It dispersed so quickly. Seems Muzan can feel fear too. In a certain forest, Kokushibo stood in contemplative silence. He had followed Muzan for centuries, and this was the first time he had ever sensed fear from him. Muzan had given only a few direct orders and then had Nakime transfer them out, enough to make them take heed. Across various places, the other demon moons speculated, then set their plans in motion. None dared disobey Muzan, especially now that he was visibly enraged. The next day, "It's over." Natsume Yuu set his pen down with a relaxed smile. His pale purple eyes drifted lazily across the room. Around him, other students stared at their papers, brows knit, then suddenly started writing again as understanding dawned. A few glanced left and right to compare answers, but the teacher's gaze from the front soon quieted them. Natsume felt he still had plenty of time. He summoned the chat group. Compared to yesterday's bustle, today was quiet, which made sense. After what happened last night, everyone was out of sorts. When Butterfly Kane ended her stream, it had already been past 3 in the morning. Even if Chongying's school started a bit later, 4 hours of sleep was barely enough for people used to going to bed early and rising early. Not to mention the things they'd seen, whether anyone could even fall asleep was another matter entirely. None of that affected Natsume. His body had endured far worse. Simple images couldn't break his will. Seeing no one chatting in the group, he opened the shared files and reviewed the breathing technique Butterfly Kane had uploaded. His own self-created breathing technique was powerful, but he didn't let himself get complacent. As the saying went, among 3 companions, there is always something to learn from another. He wanted to study other breathing techniques to see if he could absorb useful parts and improve his own, or even fuse concepts to create something new to upload. Demon Slayer's breathing techniques were demanding, beyond what ordinary people could learn, but his technique was more general and could accommodate many concepts. That flexibility made it hard to teach. His method relied on intuitively skipping intermediate steps, something others couldn't mimic, no matter how much effort they put in. Even if they forced themselves to follow his path, the results might still not match the effectiveness of other breathing techniques. With that in mind, he hoped to create something accessible so Kato Megumi and the others could gain real combat ability. Given his precarious physical condition, it was wise to prepare for contingencies. The deeper he studied breathing technique, the easier it became to pick up others. After a short while of focused thought, Natsume had memorized the basics of the technique he'd been reading and already had ideas for a new one. To accelerate progress, he used energy to strengthen his body directly, more akin to Heiman or magical enhancement than simple conditioning. Thanks to his energy mimicry, he could even shift into something like a special effects fighter. Simulations and permutations ran through his mind quickly. With his talent and the breadth of techniques he'd browsed, his understanding felt transcendent. The new breathing technique took shape smoothly. Natsume uploaded the file publicly, basic breathing technique. The class bell rang. All right, put your pens down. Students in the back, pass your papers forward, the teacher announced, rising from the podium. This was just a test. As long as you don't go completely off the rails during winter break, you won't forget everything. Natsume, sitting near the back, passed his paper forward without fuss. The pile of exams was stacked and tapped on the desk. The results will be posted outside before the first period this afternoon. If you're curious, go have a look, the teacher added, smiling to the anxious faces as he led the class out. The room immediately erupted into chatter. How'd you do? Terrible this time. I think I did all right. What was the answer to number 2? What? That was C? Don't ask him. His grades aren't good anyway. Students grouped up and drifted out in 2s and 3s, occasional cheers and groans spilling into the hallway. Natsume picked up his bento and walked out calmly. His classmates all knew he wasn't in the best health, and his handsome face attracted the attention of many girls, which left him unpopular among the boys. He didn't mind. He had little interest in forced friendships. A notification chimed in his mind. Keeping his pace, he opened the chat screen. Natsume Yuu, what was that thing you just uploaded? Just woke up? I made it while I was integrating breathing techniques. It's aimed at ordinary people. The one I use myself isn't suitable for you to practice. He glanced down over the stair railing. From his vantage point, he spotted the girls he was looking for. The girl with the high ponytail looked up as if she'd sensed him and immediately turned to smile energetically. Petite and lively, she waved her arms and bounded around. Beside her, a short black-haired girl glanced up, and the corner of her mouth curved into a sweet smile. Natsume returned a small wave, then quickened his pace toward the corner of the stairs where they were waiting. So does that mean we can actually make progress practicing it? Even a monkey could learn it, probably. But didn't you say you had a test today? Hello, everyone. As Natsume and Doma's conversation continued, Natsume stepped down the stairs and joined the small group waiting at the landing, ready to explain what he'd uploaded and show them the basics. Chapter 25, Section 25. The other two chimed in as well. Yes, after finishing the exams, there was still a bit of time left. Just as he rounded the corner, Yuya heard footsteps on the stair. He froze. A moment later, a chestnut-haired girl stepped into view. Her hair was smooth and floated slightly, giving off a faint scent. Her face was delicate and beautiful, a gentle smile on her lips, her posture straight and elegant. Sunlight from the window seemed to catch her, making her glow. Oh. Seeing Yuya so close around the corner, the girl let out a surprised little sound. Since merging with a demon's blood, Yuya's vision had improved greatly. He could easily see in the dim and even pick out small details. Through the girl's slightly parted lips, he could faintly see the tip of her tender pink tongue before she quickly snapped her mouth shut. "Excuse me, are you all right, classmate?" she asked, bowing slightly and apologizing with a hint of embarrassment. Every motion still carried that refined air, like a young lady from a respectable family. "I'm fine," Yuya said, shaking his head lightly. He glanced at her and then stepped past. The girl tilted her head, watching him walk down the stairs, then continued upward. Was that person Asuna? After she left, Yuya paused and looked up toward the landing, thinking. The girl had reminded him of Yuki Asuna, but he didn't know her name for certain. He wasn't sure whether two worlds had merged or if even more had intertwined. The thought flickered through his mind, but he didn't turn back to ask for her name. Whether she was Asuna or not no longer concerned him. His attention returned to the chat group. Butterfly Kane. So you used that little bit of time to create an entirely new breathing technique? Well, I want to say I'm used to it, but it still seems kind of extreme. Kato Megumi sat at her desk with a slightly complicated expression. After what happened last night, she had prepared to train hard and learn the breathing technique. Now Yuya said he'd improved it in the spare minutes after the exam. She felt like all her mental preparation had been for nothing. Was Yuya's exam score very good? As a diligent student, Chitanda cared about that sort of thing. I'm confident in my memory. Does the new breathing technique have any effects? By the time he'd finished typing, he had reached the courtyard where Shiramine Risa and Honjo Keide were waiting. "Sorry to keep you," he said with a small smile. Chapter 26 Characteristics. The three of them headed in the same direction they'd walked yesterday. "Keide, did you see? Yuya was amazing yesterday." Honju Keide held her bento behind her back with both hands, eyes bright with excitement as she spoke to the others. Having spent a lot of time with Yuya, Kaide's next words were predictable. He merely smiled and took it in stride. "Risa, be careful you don't fall. If you drop your bento, I won't give you any," Kaede warned, watching her friend walk backward without looking where she was going. It's fine, Shiramine and Risa replied, carefree and energetic, continuing her story. Yesterday, Yuya. Risa's animated retelling painted a vivid picture of Yuya surrounded by monsters. Kaede supported the narrative with gestures and exclamations. Yuya simply looked at them with a placid smile. "Hey, who's that guy?" School just started, and he's already got two beautiful girls around him. Damn it, it's so enviable and infuriating. That guy's from Year 1 Class A. My friend in that class said he looks sickly. Huh, wasn't he the freshman rep before? You forgot that. Sorry, the only thing I'll remember are pretty girls. Why are you trying to act cool, you jerk? People nearby had noticed the unusual trio, especially given how good-looking all three were. As a guy, Yuya could feel envious stares from others who would have liked to be in his place. He didn't care. He didn't even bother to look back. While listening to Kaede and Risa, he checked the chat again. Domomaru. So when we use sword techniques, we can also trigger those awesome visual effects. Even without a picture, Yuya could imagine Domomaru's excited face from her punctuation alone. He knew why she cared. Aside from raw strength, flashy special effects were something people loved in anime and games. Being strong was temporary, being cool was lasting. You mean like flames and lightning? Exactly. Kanai's breathing technique is flowers, right? That sounds very elegant and beautiful. If it's a derivative of the breathing technique, will it help me? Butterfly Kanai asked out of curiosity. For her, resolving the Kibutsuji Muzan problem came first. Only after that could she worry about elegance. Yes, the basic breathing technique is called basic because it can later branch into styles like thunder, flame, and so on. That branching depends on one's constitution and development. For example, I have high hopes for Megumi. She might develop a unique breathing technique in the future. Yuya had scrolled down, seen Kanai's question, and started to explain. Megumi's already faint presence could become even subtler. If she could stand unnoticed in front of an enemy, she would be a top-tier assassin. My constitution. Megumi understood immediately what he meant and felt a mix of amusement and helplessness. What had once been a troublesome trait might now become an asset. Domaru, it's that faint presence thing. Doma Umaru also understood. From what she'd seen of Seikano, she had a rough idea about Megumi. The trait that caught people's attention most was that almost non-existent presence in everyday life. I've been jealous of that. If I had it, I could play games during class. That's not a good thing, Xiaomai. Hey, I was just saying. After all, Xiaomai is already a perfect, beautiful girl. I see. Even Kane shuddered a little at the thought of Megumi's presence becoming even weaker. Improving physical abilities with breathing techniques was one thing, but if an enemy could conceal their presence and step in front of you without being noticed, that was terrifying. Chapter 26, Section 26. If it was an assassination that targeted their weaknesses, even they probably wouldn't be able to withstand it. Since Natsume understands breathing techniques so well, could Natsume create sun breathing now? I'm really curious. Chitanda Eru's messages came one after another. The words made Doma Umaru and the others pause in the chat. Sun breathing. It was the original style created by Yoriichi Tsugikuni, a genius whose very presence could drive people to despair. Even Kibutsuji Muzan had been routed by him. The scars Yoriichi left, even after centuries, still haunted Muzan, forcing him to expend power just to keep them suppressed. And now Natsume Yuu had learned many breathing techniques. Could he recreate sun breathing? Natsume Yuu, sure. Do you need it? Natsume sat on the grass, watched the two people beside him sit, then opened his bento and ate, answering casually in his mind. To her, the most important breathing technique for dealing with Kibutsuji Muzan, being treated like a casual topic, felt like a stab to the heart. She reached out and patted her chest, murmuring to herself, "Just get used to it. Just get used to it." If Xiao Mai kept up her outer image all the time, she might have a chance at learning it. Unfortunately, her true personality is too. Unaware of what Butterfly Kanai was thinking, Natsume went on. Doma Umaru's public persona was athletic, helpful, and flawlessly polite. To her classmates, she was warm and dazzling, like sunlight. While she might not be able to manifest Sun-Breathing's ferocity fully, she had a better chance than the other three. Doma Umaru, "I'm sorry my personality is so regrettable." The rest of the sentence went unspoken, but Doma could guess the meaning. She wasn't angry, just a little miffed. Chapter 27. The Mountain Range. My apologies, my apologies. From that tone, I don't hear any apology at all. She shot back instinctively. Then she covered her mouth and let out a yawn. Her eyes went a little cloudy. Compared to her usual energetic self, this tired Doma immediately drew attention. Did Xiao Mai stay up studying too late last night? Maybe she was worn out from attending some fancy party? Party! Think about it. Xiao Mai is so exceptional, her family must take her to events. You're right. Listening to the chatter, Doma's expression stiffened and one eye twitched. Although she'd said her family was ordinary, her public image as a proper young lady made people interpret the comment as humble modesty. Xiao Mai didn't sleep well last night? Asked a short-haired girl with wine-red hair in a soft, concerned voice. As a prominent figure in the class, she drew some attention instantly. Blushing at the attention, Hai Lao Ming Kai's breathing quickened with excitement. She was frankly, overwhelmingly well-endowed for her age. Her shirt looked like it might burst. Fortunately, it was break time, and the classroom wasn't crowded. Only Doma, at the front, could see this scene clearly. Thank you for your concern, Hai Lao Ming Kai. I just lost track of time while reading last night. Doma stared at the mountain range in front of her for a beat, then forced a perfect smile. Yesterday's events had struck her hard. Joining the chat group in the morning, the revelation that the others had virtual games, the terrifying ghosts she'd seen at night, things most people never experienced in a lifetime, all happening to her in a single day. Even as a homebody, the mental strain was intense. After Butterfly Kanai's live stream ended, she hadn't been able to sleep for a long time. When she did, the dreams were bizarre. Becoming a genius who practiced sun-breathing to behead Kibutsuji Muzan, scenes of being attacked and left only as severed limbs, and more. She woke the next morning feeling even worse. In class, she was basically sleepwalking. None of this was something she could tell Hai Lao Ming Kai. Is that so? Well, rest up. I'll wake you when the teacher comes, Hai Lao Ming Kai said with a gentle smile and a flustered wave. Thank you, Hai Lao Ming Kai. Doma didn't refuse. She lay her head on the desk, face turned to the window, eyes closed. Her hair fell down her back, and the sunlight draped over her like a golden veil. She looked almost sacred. The atmosphere softened, voices became hushed. In the back row, a long-haired girl with black hair glared at Doma as if she couldn't stand the sight of her. The other students avoided her gaze, worried she might make a scene. If anyone looked closely, though, they would see the glares were unfocused. She was lost in thought. Doma, who looked like a sleeping beauty to everyone, unconsciously opened the chat the next second. Doma Umaru, sometimes I really wish I had Kato Megumi's ability. I worked so hard this morning not to fall asleep in class. Maybe I did fall asleep, class just flew by. Only after sending the messages did she realize that, even with her eyes closed, she hadn't really rested at all. Me too. I'm not feeling great today. Chitanda, my school hasn't started yet, but I stayed up much later than usual as well. Like Doma, the others chimed in. Is Natsume okay? These things are nothing to me. Natsume answered honestly. Compared to what you've always put up with, these are minor. I'll prepare some calming incense for you later. Light it when you rest. It might help you sleep. Seeing their concern, Kane offered after thinking a moment. Please do. Thank you. If this keeps up, it will affect our classes. Thank you, Kane. It's a small thing. Your condition matters to me too. Natsume, I'm leaving Kade to you tonight. Shiramine Risa suddenly patted Natsume Yuu's shoulder, still brimming with energy. When I finish my makeup exam, we'll hang out. Then you'd better pass. Don't let Kade and I become famous while you haven't. Natsume shot a playful smile back at Shiramine Risa. Even here, his mind was still half on the chat group. Chapter 27, Section 27. He didn't stop observing what was happening around him. He listened to the conversation between Shiramine Risa and Honjo Kade. Oh ho, you and I will be really busy then. Want to come with us? Risa teased. Honjo Kade, smaller in stature, responded with a three-part laugh that somehow made her sound like a tiny queen. Yu's fine, but Kade wants to become famous. Risa's lively eyes narrowed and she tilted her head. Her brown high ponytail swayed, full of youthful energy. She had played all kinds of games with Natsume Yuu and knew his strengths well. In real life, his body wasn't in great shape, and he wasn't cut out for strenuous exercise, but in games his virtual body was different. Yuu, who had once been outstanding at all sorts of sports in virtual arenas, moved with superhuman skill. In every match, Risa simply couldn't compete. Beating Natsume Yuu had become her ultimate goal in every game, yet she'd never managed it. Kade, on the other hand, wasn't very interested in games, so Risa didn't expect much from her. She just wanted Kade along so she wouldn't be lonely. I'll definitely surprise you then, Risa declared. Kade puffed out her cheeks like a hamster, muttering in mock displeasure. Before she could finish, a finger poked the puffy cheek. Pfft, a muffled sound escaped her. Her dark eyes followed the fingertip upward to Natsume Yuu's gently smiling face. Risa's free, throaty laugh rang under the shade of the tree. She clutched her stomach and swung her legs back and forth. Her over-the-knee white stockings stretched tight over slender calves and hinted at bare skin. Kade, who'd meant to pretend to retaliate, was infected by Risa's laughter and burst out laughing too. Her kneeling posture hid most of her legs. Only the black stockings above her knees and the gap between her thighs were visible. Their laughter was bright and clear as silver bells, and even Natsume Yuu found himself smiling leisurely. Chapter 28, Yuki Asuna. After lunch, there was still plenty of time, so the three of them lingered under the tree, chatting. In reality, Honjo Kade and Natsume Yuu were helping Shiramine Risa guess likely exam questions. Risa's grades weren't bad. This school had a high entrance standard and was one of the best private high schools in the city. Getting in meant she was capable. She just occasionally played too much and let her studies slide, especially when she was obsessed with trying to beat Natsume Yuu. That persistence was almost extreme. Once she set a study plan, though, she would be able to handle the makeup exam without much trouble. Natsume Yuu kept half an eye on the group chat and on Risa's conversation, and time passed quickly. Ding-a-ling. A bright notification sound cut through the air. It's time to go back, someone said. Natsume Yuu was the first to stand and reached out his hands to the two girls. Heisho, without a trace of embarrassment, Shiramine Risa grabbed his fingers and leapt up using his support. Thanks. Kade thanked him softly as she rose, taking his hand and then, after letting go, patting the back of her skirt to brush off dust and bits of grass. Soon they were walking toward the classroom building together. At the gate, Natsume Yuu waved goodbye and headed up the stairs alone. The school's classes weren't divided strictly by grade, and this time he'd been unlucky. He wasn't placed in the same class as the two girls. On the walk, he didn't see the chestnut-haired girl again. He had suspected she might be someone he'd been thinking about, but it wasn't enough to make him search for her. After the results were posted, he'd checked the list. If she really was Yuki Asuna, her grades would show it. He just needed to look for that name, and his doubts would be settled. When he entered the classroom, the usual noise died down. A few girls watched him with curious eyes. Some boys emitted thin clouds of envy. Natsume Yuu was used to that sort of attention. He got it when he went out with his mother or with Kade and Risa. Thinking back on the lunchtime chatter, he came to a quiet conclusion. So that's it? He didn't stop or bother to explain. His posture didn't waver and his eyes didn't dart around. He simply ignored the changes in the room. The quiet only lasted a moment before conversation resumed. After all, not everyone cared about what had been talked about at lunch. Some people who had been gossiping stopped when they saw the subject appear, and others went quiet because the room had gone silent, but soon it evened out into ordinary chatter. Footsteps sounded, and the teacher, holding textbooks, appeared in the doorway. The class quieted again. A few students braced for a lecture, but the teacher only looked at Natsume Yuu for a moment with a slightly puzzled expression before beginning. "Let's start. Everyone, stand." With the usual rustle, the lesson began. Natsume Yuu's eyes appeared to be fixed on the blackboard, but in truth his attention drifted to the group chat on his phone. Time slipped by until the bell rang, and he realized the period was over. With the chat group, passing the time is more fun, he thought, letting out a small, contented sigh. Class dismissed. The morning test papers have been graded. Check the notice board, the teacher announced, closing her book. When she left, the students poured out of the room, some sprinting to be first, others going in small, nervous groups. The classroom incident from earlier had already been forgotten. Chapter 28. Section 28. Natsume Yuu, who didn't care about grades but wanted to clear up his uncertainty, stood and walked slowly toward the notice board. The crowd clustered around it, some wearing rueful smiles, others quietly relieved. Thanks to his taller stature and sharp eyesight, he didn't need to push to the front to read the top entries. First Year Class A, Natsume Yuu. First Year Class C, Yuki Asuna. It really is her, he thought. Same name, same aura, the same beautiful girl, right down to the hair color. Natsume Yuu couldn't accept this as coincidence. If she was someone he knew from another world, then only one possibility made sense. Yuki Asuna was Asuna. "I haven't heard of SAO starting here yet," he muttered. As a gamer who'd played plenty of titles, he would have noticed a phenomenon as big as SAO. If SAO had begun in the real world, it would have left unmistakable traces. So his best explanation was that the merged worlds were bringing in elements on a staggered schedule. SAO had simply appeared later. He told himself he'd check later to see whether other familiar characters had shown up from different games or stories. Since this was a merged world, anything could have been fused in. He needed to know what other worlds might be present. If dangerous characters had crossed over, he'd have to be careful for the sake of those he cared about most, his mother and Honjo Keide. He didn't want anything to happen to them. I should teach them the breathing technique, he decided. It was better to teach people how to protect themselves than to try to always be there. The breathing technique generated ki, which could boost life energy and slow aging, useful both for safety and to avoid living to see loved ones gone after he resolved the curse inside him. If he lived a long life, he wanted them to be around. "You," an energetic voice from behind, and a familiar small frame pressed against his arm. A light, comforting scent reached him. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Came to check the results too?" Shiramine Risa asked without waiting. She'd slipped an arm through his and was tiptoeing to see over the crowd. Her height was decent for a girl, but in this throng it still wasn't easy to see much. Honjo Keide was beside her, also on tiptoe. Smaller and more delicate than Risa, she offered only the view of her back and an already relaxed expression. She clearly trusted her score. "Did you see her name?" Natsume asked inwardly, but he kept his voice steady. The notice board was small. Anyone with a clear view could see who was where, and he'd already memorized the top ranks. "No way. Leave it to you, Yu." Risa gave up trying to get a look and looked at him instead. She had been hoping for some miracle, maybe barely passing, so she wouldn't have to retake anything and could get back to gaming sooner. "Keide's in the 50s, a normal grade," Natsume said promptly when Risa asked if she needed to worry. Then Keide, expecting his answer, turned and smiled. "You still first, right?" she asked, eyes curved into a crescent. "Yeah." He nodded lightly. He didn't put effort into grades for their own sake, but he stayed competent, partly because he wanted his mother to be proud. He hadn't manipulated his score, just kept things steady. Risa groaned and held her head. "I was hoping for at least some kind of miracle." "Apologize to those who studied hard," Natsume teased, patting her head before moving off. He'd learned what he needed to know. There was no reason to linger. "You don't get to say that." Risa protested, rolling her eyes. She and Kade were used to him being at the top since kindergarten. Sometimes it seemed like he'd been born that way. Risa envied him. Everyone played games a lot, so how did he stay so good at school? Did he secretly tutor himself at night? Katie chalked it up to attentive listening in class and steady study, compared to Natsume's habit of dozing off or reading whatever odd books caught his interest. They didn't go far together. The two girls headed toward their classrooms, while Natsume walked to the stairwell. Just as he reached the landing, rhythmic light footsteps reached his ears and made him pause. He looked up with calm interest. He couldn't see the person yet, but the cadence of the steps told him who it was. A familiar figure appeared on the stairs. A neat pleated skirt, white stockings, and a measured, effortless gait. The sight was enough for him to recognize the person without any flashy detail. It was someone he already had reason to notice. Chapter 29, Section 29. The buttons on the black jacket were fastened precisely, shaping a silhouette that looked older than her years. Her delicate face held a faint look of surprise. She hadn't expected to run into the same person she'd met at noon. It was the same staircase, the same corner, only their positions were reversed. "Hello." Yuki Asuna offered a gentle smile and a slight nod. Natsume Yuu returned the nod and walked up from the side. Asuna walked down with a smile on her lips, eyes fixed ahead. Knowing what had happened earlier, Natsume Yuu didn't look back. He quietly headed toward the classroom. No wonder the teacher didn't call us out earlier. Someone got first place. That figures. He came in as the top student. He's good-looking, smart, and has two beautiful girls around him. What a lucky guy. Is this some otome game protagonist? At least your body's better than his. Hey, no joking about people's bodies. That shyness is practically adorable. Right, I want to hug him and comfort him. Which one from noon is his girlfriend, I wonder? As Natsume Yuu approached the classroom, he could already hear the chatter inside. The students hadn't left, but friends had snapped pictures and passed around the grade reports, and the noise came from gossip over those images. Natsume Yuu simply shook his head and kept going. When he entered, the room fell silent like the end of lunch break. Then the students hurriedly switched topics to cover their curiosity. He acted as if he hadn't heard anything and returned to his seat in a composed manner. The others filed in afterward, glancing at him with curiosity and a touch of awkwardness. They'd probably pieced the scene together. Still, no one dared approach. Natsume Yuu's calm alone was imposing, and the group felt people like him were in a different sphere. That subtle distance granted him an unexpected peace. Chapter 30. The Changing Atmosphere in the Chat Group. Link start. Natsume Yuu lounged on his bed, put on his gaming headset, and murmured the familiar phrase. White light flared before his closed eyes. Purple and pink streaks swept past like a tunnel through space and time. In the next instant, the view shifted into a small town brimming with RPG charm. Somewhere in the distance, birds chirped. Butterfly Kane. I've seen this before, but it still feels amazing. Just a few items, and you can send someone to another world. Watching the scene unfold in Natsume Yuu's vision, Butterfly Kane couldn't hide her admiration. I understand that feeling too. People can really do things like this. You, don't you have homework? Doma, homework's nothing. Takes like 10 minutes. Natsume Yuu glanced at the chat group and answered casually. He walked toward the town's outskirts. Hanju Kade was busy and planned to be online in the evening. In the meantime, Yu intended to log in and keep leveling. His equipment was still a beginner's katana, but after acquiring the combo master skill, he'd stopped relying on weapons. As long as his combos kept going, his effective attack power could outstrip many, even most, weapons. The downside was a lack of special skills. His combat approaches had become a bit repetitive. An ordinary girl, Megumi felt a little speechless about the prodigious abilities of the top student. This afternoon, I tried Yu's basic breathing technique. It's much easier to practice. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I feel like I get hungry more easily. Chitaru stood in her family's courtyard in a long dress. Spring had come, but a cool breeze still stirred her soft black hair. Every so often, she adjusted her breathing. She was still technically on spring break, with days to go before school resumed, so she had time to practice. Compared to Doma Umaru and Kato Megumi, she'd managed to start first. Butterfly Kane, Yuu's breathing technique is detailed, so even ordinary people can understand it. As an expert in breathing techniques, Butterfly Kane had read Yuu's version that afternoon. Knowing it came from Natsume Yuu, she didn't dismiss it as a mere beginner's manual. She studied it carefully, line by line. The concise explanations, the way it framed breathing techniques as something that sought answers beyond personal limits, ideas that seemed to come from elsewhere, gave her a flash of insight. She realized that if she'd had this in her training earlier, becoming a Hashira might have taken less time and her strength could have been greater. She couldn't overhaul her own method now, but she planned to absorb its valuable points and fix weaknesses in her flower breathing. By integrating those elements, she could refine her style into something uniquely suited to her. On the day of the final battle, she intended to be even stronger. Doma Umaru, I'll have to work harder then. Umaru's tone turned serious. To learn the breathing technique properly, she resolved to cut down on gaming. She'd only play once she'd mastered it. She put on a confident front, perfect grades, athletic, beautiful, and she had pride. She couldn't match Natsume Yuu, but she didn't want to fall behind Chitanda Eru or Kato Megumi. It wasn't jealousy. She simply didn't want to lose. Kato Megumi, I'm a little interested too. Megumi walked alone down the road, her backpack held in front with both hands. She was an ordinary girl from an ordinary family with ordinary friends, only her low presence felt unusual sometimes. She'd long since learned to live with that quietness. But one day, she'd stumbled on something not ordinary, and her otherwise ordinary life had begun to take a turn toward the extraordinary. She had always been overlooked, a weak presence people disliked. Then a genius, someone you could call the personification of talent, had placed high hopes on her. Praise like that, neither Xiaomai nor Eru had ever received. From that moment on, the ordinary girl's world seemed to brighten. She wanted to be extraordinary, or at least not be left behind by everyone else. Butterfly Kane covered one cheek with her hand and smiled softly at the chat messages from the three girls. Though she hid it well, she felt the invisible current of competition. Looks like I'll have to work harder. I can't let the juniors outpace me. Time, which had already been pressing, felt even tighter in that instant. As one of the strongest in the group and the oldest sister figure, she had to keep growing. Kane didn't want to run into trouble later and dump it on the younger members. For some things, it was better to let those who had experienced despair handle them. The little brothers and sisters could just enjoy the world peacefully. That was Kane's obsession as an elder and as an older sister. If there's anything you don't understand, ask me directly. It's boring when I'm leveling up anyway, Natsume Yuu typed as he walked toward the wilderness. He glanced at the group chat and spoke aloud, not intending to kill the healthy competitive atmosphere. After all, it was a good environment for growth. Butterfly Kane dropped her reserve and began asking questions about the breathing technique. Natsume Yuu answered as they moved deeper into the mountain forest. The once dense trees thinned without him noticing, the grass underfoot vanished, and the ground turned to desolation. The air grew still, as if he had stepped into the hunting grounds of some apex predator. Natsume Yuu, who had been acting as guide, didn't hesitate. He pushed on until he stood before a yawning cave. Around the cave entrance stood several people in red robes. Natsume Yuu's arrival immediately drew their attention. "They're here! They're here!" Doma Umaru burst out, excitement crackling in her voice as she stopped trying the breathing technique to watch. "What is it?" Kato Megumi asked. "In games, there are always those players who occupy dungeons or monsters," Doma said. "If other players try to move in, a fight breaks out." Chitanda Eru tilted her head, puzzled. "But this is just like a game. Why are you so excited?" Megumi, who played occasionally, understood the thrill but didn't get Doma's intensity. Even without seeing the scene, the others felt the excitement in Doma's words. "I just don't like those guys," she said bluntly, her resentment plain. "Friend, did you come alone?" a mage with a staff asked from the cave mouth. Beside him, a swordsman with a long blade watched Natsume Yuu intently, sizing him up. Natsume Yuu replied calmly. He'd seen the group chat but didn't care. He didn't sense malice from the red-robed players. Want to team up? This maze is pretty tough, the mage offered, smiling. Ah, I forgot to introduce ourselves. We're from Emperor Flame Country, he added. You won't have to worry about us stealing gear. We'll split whatever we get. Natsume Yuu glanced at their robes and nodded with understanding. Emperor Flame Country, the guild under the so-called Flame Emperor Mii, had a decent reputation. The name was meant to establish credibility. Thanks, but no need, he said, shaking his head, and stepped into the cave alone. The red-robed group went silent, stunned. By the time they reacted, he was already inside the maze. Is he really going in alone? He must be a high-level player, the mage said in surprise. No, his level is only 10, said an assassin whose face was wrapped in cloth and 2 daggers hung at his waist. He'd used a skill to check basic info, a rookie by levels. Level 8, the poison dragon in this maze is a level 20 boss, the mage cried, incredulous. Even in a game, walking into certain death was strange. Maybe he needs materials from the maze, or it's a quest, the assassin offered. That's the only sensible possibility. The others nodded. If it were a quest, stranger things happened. Wait, I remember him. He's the guy from the forums yesterday, the swordsman suddenly exclaimed, slapping his palm to his thigh. He'd watched the viral video that had drawn official attention. As another melee class, he'd felt inferior watching the man's flawless technique. So that's him, another murmured. I thought he looked familiar. Do you think he'll take on the poison dragon? Someone asked. Impossible. Even with crazy skill, the level gap is too big, one scoffed. The poison dragon uses wide area attacks. He can't dodge them all. Then we wait and see, and if he survives, invite him to the guild, another suggested. I'll go find the guild leader. They argued in low voices, deciding to watch rather than interfere immediately. In the group chat, Kato Megumi typed, "Things aren't going how you expected." Doma Umaru replied, exasperated and thrilled at once, "This is too unconventional. Chitandaru, isn't that perfect? We can avoid a battle." Butterfly, are the monsters here stronger than yesterday? Yes, this is the poison dragon maze. The rewards are decent. At Butterfly Kane's words, Natsume Yuu answered immediately. The maze had high-level bosses and wandering monsters you didn't need to hunt for. It was perfect for leveling and for earning gold. He had saved enough money too, and changing outfits later would be easier. He hadn't cared much about gear strength, but he could get a respectable set here. He was tempted. The cave's interior was wide, but more than half of it was taken up by a bubbling, ominous river of poison. Green smoke hung low. Fortunately, it wasn't a forced poisoning debuff. Otherwise, even with his high evasion, he'd slowly lose health. The harsh environment left the cave otherwise bare. Only slimes lived here, ordinary slimes that didn't care about the surroundings. There were no great sage slimes to slow him down. One swing of his longsword killed them in a single hit. Deeper inside, a thick wooden door appeared. "Boss room," Natsume Yuu murmured, and kept walking. The heavy-looking door yielded when he put a hand to it. It opened a little. The green smoke inside grew thicker, and a faint whooshing filled the air. Bang! As soon as he stepped through, the massive door slammed shut behind him with a weighty boom. It felt like an ancient gladiator arena. The door would only open when one side survived. Natsume Yuu wasn't surprised. He looked forward. The slam woke the sleeping monster, and 6 lantern-sized eyes blinked open. Chapter 32, Transparent World? This is a game. 6 basketball-sized crimson lights flared above. Thump, the ground shook underfoot. A strong gust swept from the swirling smoke and thinned it. A 3-headed monster several meters tall stood before him, captured on the live stream. Its thick limbs stomped the earth. Its triple roar had been the sound that shook the cave. Red scarlet skin and black scales armored its back. The crimson lights were its 6 pupils. Purple liquid dripped from its massive mouths. Hiss! Even the ground, corroded long by the poison fog, sizzled where the drips landed. Light smoke rose, and small pits were left behind. Roar! A thunderous roar reverberated around the chamber, making eardrums vibrate. 3 pairs of huge eyes fixed on Natsume Yuu. As expected of a natural airhead, she could even eat that thing, someone commented in the stream. Natsume Yuu stared up at the beast and couldn't help but think of Honju Keide. With its appearance, he felt a twinge of sympathy. It was hard to imagine eating something that looked so alive. What a big monster. It looks almost dinosaur-like. Butterfly. This doesn't look easy, Yuu. Are you okay? Domomaru. Yuu's agility isn't low, but this boss seems like an area of effect type. If it has extra HP or defensive buffs, taking even one hit could be dangerous. As an experienced gamer, Doma could tell from the scene aim what kind of fight this would be. Bugumi. So he can't take even one hit? She whispered. She understood how perilous the situation was. Bosses usually had enormous health and defense and serious offense. A single mistake could spell failure. A health bar popped up above the poison dragon. Natsume Yuu knew the cinematic entrance had ended. The three heads rose, and yellow-green poison glistened between their teeth. Natsume Yuu crouched, then his body shot forward like lightning. Splatter! Poisonous liquid streamed from the three massive mouths and roared toward him. The level gap was significant, but Natsume Yuu had invested more than half of his initial 100 free attribute points into agility. On top of that, he had the agility skill, which effectively doubled his speed. Even players in their 20s couldn't match his agility. The poison dragon, not built for speed, couldn't keep up. As the river of poison chased, Natsume Yuu was already behind the beast in a couple strides. He bent his knees and pushed off. Bang! His already tremendous speed spiked. He slid under the poison dragon like a flash. The moment he appeared behind it, cracks spidered along its limbs and belly, purple fragments etched from the fissures. A sliver of the health bar emptied. Not bad, he thought. He launched himself upward. His longsword moved in a rising arc. Bang! A red afterimage swept through the air with brutal force, shattering nearby rocks into flying shards. The afterimage traced the dragon's tail. Midair, Natsume twisted his wrist and released his grip so the sword reversed in his hand. He brought the blade down as he landed on the unarmored part of the dragon's back. The longsword bit into the exposed flesh. Using the scales as a starting block, his toes pushed off and his body surged forward. He didn't pull the blade free, he dragged it along as he ran down the creature's back. Roar! The three heads rose like serpents and issued a pained bellow. The creature's thick limbs slammed the ground. Hiss! That sounded painful. Me too. Watching the cracks form where Natsume ran, both of them felt a phantom ache in their own backs. Kato Megumi, surprised, whispered, "The monster is so realistic. Can it even simulate pain?" Chapter 32, Section 32, But You. Butterfly Kane said, "Every dodge is an opportunity to strike." Recalling the battle from the start, Kane's eyes shone as she explained to the three others. The two sentences sounded simple, but in a real fight, the difference between seeing an enemy's opening and hesitating can be a hair's breadth. Is that move a feint? Is that the bait? 1,000 doubts can freeze you for a single instant, and in combat, that instant is all you get. Seizing it and judging correctly is extremely difficult. Even someone like Kanae, who'd fought countless battles, had missed that moment many times. Under her guidance, Kato Megumi and the others focused harder on watching. The poison dragon spat venom, bit like three intertwined pythons, and swept with a powerful tail. Attack after attack came at them. But Natsume Yuu seemed to read the poison dragon completely. He always dodged a step ahead. The dragon's limbs moved as if right in front of him, exposing openings that made counterattacks easy. His timing and speed looked almost like those of an ordinary person who'd seen it before. I feel like even if that kind of monster appeared in real life, you could handle it easily, Chitanda Eru said. It's basically a toy, Doma Umaru added. The poison dragon's attack patterns are totally exposed, Kato Megumi observed. Watching the poison dragon's health drop faster and faster with each of Yu's strikes on the screen, the three couldn't help but comment. Butterfly Kanae nodded. Yu has completely mastered the poison dragon's methods. Even if that poison dragon showed up in the real world, she continued, with how well he understands it, even if his physical condition isn't on par with the dragon's, it wouldn't be hard for him to defeat it, she finished. Those poisonous gases wouldn't bother you. He can handle billions of ailments without trouble. Transparent world, but this is a game, Doma Umaru blurted. She'd assumed Yu had simply learned the boss's patterns, but Kanai's words suggested he was using something like the transparent world, even inside the game. Chapter 33, New Equipment. No, Kanai corrected. It's not a full transparent world. He's just simulating flesh and blood for the virtual monster in his mind. Through subtle movements, he can judge the monster's distance and attack timing perfectly. So when it looks like he almost gets hit, that's all right where he expects it to be. From browsing the Demon Slayer files, she had a rough idea of the transparent world, but knowing about it and pulling it off were different things. Doma Umaru muttered, "Sometimes games being too realistic is a problem." In some games, bosses change patterns when their health drops past a threshold and can wipe a team out for one mistake. The poison dragon didn't change its behavior even at critical health. Either there was no such mechanic, or this boss lacked it. With Yu's combo count rising, his attack power climbed considerably, and because he had the dragon's moves so well read, the fight ended quickly. Roar! With a mournful cry, the tattered poison dragon's limbs collapsed. Its body fragmented into rich purple blocks and floated upward. A glowing treasure chest appeared where it had fallen. Treasure chest! I wonder what we'll get. Doma Umaru squealed, excited. After a boss drop, opening the chest is always the most anticipated part. Yu had cleared the dungeon solo even before Hanju Kade, so he was curious too. He reached out and opened the chest. Golden light flooded his vision. System messages chimed one after another. Obtained Phantom Cloak. Obtained Phantom Combat Boots. Obtained Moon Shadow. Hint, unique equipment that can only be obtained by the first person to see and solo kill the boss and clear the dungeon. Black Rose Cloak. Agility plus 20. Destruction Growth. Skill, Empty Night Boots. Agility plus 25, Destruction Growth. Skill, Empty Moon Shadow. Strength plus 15, Destructional Empty. After this equipment is destroyed, it will instantly recover with even stronger stats. While destroyed, it does not affect your current stats. Seems the rewards are the same for everyone, but the actual equipment you get differs depending on who killed it, Yu muttered after skimming the items. Doma Umaru frowned. Is there really no problem with a game like this? She was thinking about balance. Gear in games is vital and usually must be replaced every few levels. A set of equipment that grows stronger every time it's destroyed and which never needs a real replacement could break the balance, even if this was just a beginner dungeon. It seemed absurd for such limitless growth gear to drop from a solo boss kill. Yu, put it on quick. I want to see how it looks, Butterfly Kanai urged. She wasn't thinking about balance. She just wanted to see how Yu would look in new clothes. All right. Yu nodded, curious himself. He summoned his backpack and equipped the new items. Light flowed over him from head to toe. His coarse linen clothes shifted into a black cloak trimmed with red lines. A belt tightened at his waist and the hem fluttered. His plain adventurer boots became combat boots in the same color scheme. A long sword materialized in a black scabbard, a red braided cord tied to it for a splash of color. The guard was oval, the hilt wrapped in black cord for grip, and a dragon-shaped relief adorned the pommel. It wasn't flashy, but the design pleased him. "You looks even more handsome," Butterfly Kanai exclaimed, eyes lighting up. "He looks like a serious adventurer now," Kata Megumi said. "He seems sharper instantly," Doma Umaru added. "So handsome," Chitanda Eru cried. Led by Butterfly Kanai, the other three praised him without reservation. "Thanks," Yu said. Chapter 33. Natsume Yu's lips curved into a faint smile as he finished reallocating his newly upgraded attribute points. He felt no loss of agility as he moved. Everything was smooth. When he stepped onto the teleportation array that had appeared after the poison dragon's death, his slim silhouette dissolved into light and shadow. Outside the cave, the few players who had been waiting idly suddenly noticed a burst of white light at the entrance. A figure in black and red appeared for a moment, then slipped back into the cave before they could get a good look. They froze and exchanged bewildered looks. "Did you see that clearly?" the mage asked his teammate, surprise widening his eyes. He cleared it, and he got what looks like pretty good gear. Even from that brief glimpse, the swordsman could tell enough. It wasn't only the gear stats, the outfit itself was impressive. For a beginner to have equipment like that, there was only one likely explanation. It must be a boss drop. How long did that take? Even if he put all his points into strength, there's no way he could have killed the boss that fast, right? The assassin said, baffled. He couldn't imagine how anyone who dumped points into strength would have both the offense and survivability to handle the boss's attacks. Yet that man had cleared the maze faster than all four of them together, despite being a lower level. Maybe he learned some powerful skill, another mage suggested half-jokingly. The swordsman shook his head. Even then, it's crazy. What skill lets a level 8 take down a level 20 boss in 10 minutes? True, the mage admitted after thinking. None of them could make sense of it. With the boost from his new equipment and his understanding of the poison dragon's patterns, Natsume Yuu reappeared at the cave entrance 4 or 5 minutes later. The few from Emperor Flame Country clicked their tongues in private admiration at his speed. As he prepared to enter the maze again, the mage called out quickly, "Brother, wait a moment." Natsume paused and turned. His calm face, lit by pale purple eyes, swept over them. The mage's words caught in his throat as a chill ran down his spine. Under those eyes, he felt the sensation of being completely seen through, exposed as if he were standing naked before them. "This is just a game," he muttered to himself, hugging his shoulders as if to ward off the cold disbelief. "Have you joined a guild?" the mage blurted, trying to regain composure. "We'd like to invite you to join Emperor Flame Country." The swordsman, seeing his teammate flustered, stepped forward with a smile. "Thanks for the offer, but I'm playing with friends." Natsume understood instantly and declined curtly. "Then I'll take my leave." Without waiting for more, he vanished into the teleportation light again. "What are we going to do?" the assassin asked, staring at the spot where Natsume had disappeared. "What else?" the swordsman said with a helpless shrug. "If he doesn't want to join, can we force him? He's probably not an unknown player. Someone like that should have companions." The swordsman turned to the mage. "What was that earlier? Why were you so out of it?" "And nothing," the mage stammered. A thought from reality popped into my head." He forced a laugh, unwilling to say more. Even if he tried to explain, he doubted anyone would believe him. Besides, the feeling felt almost like an illusion. "All right then, let's get back to farming for materials," the swordsman said, dropping the subject. "I'll let Lord Flame Emperor know." The mage nodded, and the group moved toward the cave entrance, passing on what had happened to Mi. The maze that had been bustling moments ago fell quiet again. Far away, in a strange, sterile space, several puppets hovered before a large screen showing the one-sided scene. Natsume Yuu's image replayed on it. One puppet stared at the fallen poison dragon and breathed out a hiss. "What does this person do in real life?" "What an incredible skill," another puppet said. "He even learned Peerless Combo. I think we're going to have a formidable player on our hands." "Do we nerf that skill?" a third puppet asked anxiously. "Not yet. Let's wait and see how the first event goes," a fourth replied. "And should we change the solo clear reward for the Poison Dragon Maze?" "No need. It's practically impossible for another player to clear it solo on their first try." The puppets kept debating the footage, unable to call it a battle at all and wondering what to do. Natsume Yuu, of course, had no idea he was being watched. He cleared the maze several more times and quickly climbed to level 18. He glanced at his experience bar and muttered, "Time to change locations." This maze was meant for beginners. Even if he hogged all the boss experience, the Poison Dragon's rewards were dwindling at his current level. Back in the party chat, the others were talking about the monotony of beginner bosses. Doma Umaru commented wryly, "If the Poison Dragon were a real NPC, it'd probably be crying." Butterfly Kanai shivered at the thought. "Thank goodness it's not real. Being trapped in one place and killed over and over, just imagining that is terrifying." Kato Megumi said, "With so many worlds, maybe there really are tragic ones out there." Chitanda Eru, who had come to understand more about the game's rules, grew melancholy. To experience things together and then forget the next moment. She pictured fighting alongside people, only to lose that memory the next time, and the thought squeezed at her heart. Dying again and again, repeating the same actions, it feels so sad. The others fell silent under the weight of that thought. Sensing the heavy mood, Doma Umaru cleared his throat. "How about we change the subject?" "Speaking of which, Chitanda, there's something I'm curious about," he added, trying to steer the conversation. Chitanda tilted her head cutely. "About the ice cream. Will you keep making it?" Doma asked. Chitanda brightened. That was my uncle's call, his way of expressing himself. I'll ask the Classic Literature Club to make the ice cream. Even though the others couldn't see her determination, Chitanda clasped her hands and encouraged herself. She could write the ice cream herself, she thought, but she wanted the club to help. Chapter 34, Section 34. But Chitanda Eru wanted the display to look the same as in previous years. After all, it was the only thing left behind by her uncle, whose fate remained unknown. Just seeing the ice cream would remind people that someone had been sacrificed for resisting. Is that so? She said. Natsume Yuu nodded softly. He noticed something else at the same time. Chitanda had said she'd asked her friends from the Classics Club for help. She clearly had no intention of rejoining the club. Natsume Yuu understood. Her abundant curiosity had already satisfied itself. The familiar mystery had become boring. In contrast, the chat group that spanned many worlds had become a place where she could vent that curiosity. Having guessed her intention, he didn't expose it. He kept the conversation casual. Even though he'd arrived at a new leveling spot, he still paid attention to the chat group, making the monotonous grind a little more enjoyable. Butterfly Kane watched his battles carefully. She wouldn't mind learning a thing or two from them. With Natsume Yuu's explanations, Doma Umaru and the others grasped the basics of the breathing technique more thoroughly and started trying it themselves. Chapter 35. Maple will eventually become the Demon King. Whew, Natsume Yuu let out a long breath as he peeled off his equipment. After getting out of bed, he stretched and glanced out the window. The setting sun had already dyed the clouds a pale gold. He walked downstairs to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Natsume Reiko had warned him not to get too close to cooking, worried he might overdo it or get hurt. But Natsume Yuu knew his body's limits. Helping his mother come home to a hot, steaming meal was something he could manage. Soon, the cleaver began tapping the cutting board, and the smell of food filled the house. Yu-chan, I'm home, Reiko called from the doorway. Welcome back, and I told you not to call me Chan, he replied, watching his mother enter with a mock helpless tone. Their usual banter returned with her arrival. Dinner wasn't long. Afterward, as Reiko washed the dishes, Natsume Yuu asked, Do you have anything else to do tonight? Not really. Want to go out for a walk? She answered after a moment's thought, then shook her head and smiled proudly. Yu-chan is so clingy. I'll teach you a breathing method that's good for your body, he said, ignoring the playful suffix in her voice. A breathing method? Reiko tilted her head in curiosity. Okay, wait for me. She didn't hesitate. She wouldn't refuse anything he suggested. He poured 2 cups of tea and set one opposite him. When Reiko came over, dried her hands, and sat down, she looked at him with bright, curious eyes. After a sip, she said, You're breathing? Natsume Yuu explained and showed her the basics. They lost track of time as he taught, and she practiced. When he finally glanced at the clock, it was already past 9, over an hour later than the time he had agreed to meet Honjo Kade. He had the habit of not bringing his phone into the kitchen, so if Kade had messaged, he wouldn't have seen it. Forget it, he thought. I'll apologize later. Let's stop for today, he told Reiko. From here on, it's mostly practice. Reiko tried to keep the rhythm of the breathing technique and then breathed normally with a little hum. She wasn't skilled yet and couldn't hold it long, but she felt something miraculous. Her full stomach settled and the fatigue from a day's work eased. It felt as if her digestion had strengthened and her body began to absorb nutrients more quickly. Keep practicing. It'll be good for your skin and things like that, he added with a light chuckle. Really? Reiko's face lit up. She was a woman and cared about that sort of thing. She'd practice eagerly without another prompt. Yes, he said. Then I'll practice a little longer. You go play with Kaide-chan and the others first. Her enthusiasm grew at his confirmation, and she waved him off as he stood. Natsume Yuu suspected she'd guessed why he'd been checking the time. Get some rest, he warned gently. The breathing helps your body absorb nutrients faster, but it doesn't restore mental energy. All right then, Reiko said with the slightest twinge of disappointment at having to stop. She would have practiced all night if he hadn't intervened. I'll go up first, he said, and headed for his room. Back in his room, he noticed the green light blinking on his desk phone. He picked it up and saw several messages. Shiramine Risa's greeting made it obvious she was getting tired from studying. Honju Kade, seeing he hadn't replied, had probably guessed something was up. She'd left her character name, Maple, in the message. The last message had been sent over an hour ago. He sent a quick gaming emoji to Risa, then began putting on his gaming gear. "Link start," he said softly. The scenery around him changed in an instant. Passing through the tunnel that felt like another world, his figure transformed into a game character wearing a black coat. Such handsome equipment. "How did you get it?" "I want it too. Maybe Izu-san can make it?" "That guy looks so cool." Shh, no idea how long he spent customizing that appearance. Chapter 35, Section 35. His slender figure was clad in a black and red coat that twisted around him, and with his handsome face he looked every inch a high-ranked adventurer. He immediately drew stares, envy, jealousy, curiosity, crowding in from every direction. It was evening, and Natsume Yuu could feel the population of the town swell compared with the afternoon. He didn't mind. After checking the spot for beginner leveling, he set off. At the same time, he opened his friends list, searched for Maple's name, and sent a request. Strangely, by the time he left the beginner town, Honjo Kade still hadn't accepted. Could she have fallen asleep? Natsume Yuu muttered to himself, remembering how she'd once lain down in the wilderness and nodded off, only to wake up surrounded by monsters, and, because of that, had gained a useful skill. A few players approached, whispering among themselves with odd expressions. "That girl actually fell asleep in the wilderness. Impressive," one said. "Her defense is off the charts. Look at her gear. She's a beginner. She must have put all her points into defense," another theorized. To be surrounded by that many monsters and still be a beginner, she'd have to dump everything into defense to survive. Yesterday there was some pro who dodged a swarm of hundreds. Today a beginner tanks them. This game's wild. Hundreds? I heard it was more than that. No, you're both wrong. I was there. It was over 1,000. That master had a long saber. The storyteller's excitement drew gasps from his friends. Even with Natsume Yuu's steady mind, the retelling began to blur truth and exaggeration. If he wasn't the one who saw it, he might have believed them too. Amused, Natsume Yuu walked in the direction they'd come from. Who else would sleep out in the open but his oblivious childhood friend? As he went, other players talked about monsters piling up in that area, confirming he was on the right path. A few minutes later, he found them. A dozen or so monsters formed a ring on the lawn, the ones in the center attacking with all their might. Between the gaps, he saw Honjo Kade, the target of their frenzy, sleeping soundly. A sweet, babyish smile graced her face. Her small mouth opened and closed with soft breaths. Someone who didn't know better might have thought she was enjoying a luxurious massage. Natsume Yuu triggered the in-game camera and snapped a picture during a break in the monster's attacks. He smiled at the frozen image, then drew Moonshadow. The grass collapsed beneath his feet as he moved. Only a black and red afterimage remained, streaking across the field like a lightning bolt. The saber flashed coldly, and within a single breath, his figure stopped, and the blade slid back into its sheath with a soft click. The monsters, mid-attack, watched their health bars plummet. In an instant, their bars emptied like an avalanche. Their bodies dissolved into countless purple cubes that ascended and vanished. Honju Kade remained asleep through it all, her lips curved in that peaceful smile. Natsume Yuu crouched beside her and gently poked her round, childlike face with a long, slender finger. She murmured and reached out to push the thing away, grasping something long and hard. Her groggy mind registered the shape, finger. At first, she barely reacted, but then cold sweat broke out as her eyes flew open and she found Natsume Yuu smiling down at her and his finger trapped in her hand. "Morning, Yuu," she said automatically. "You silly goose, it isn't morning," he teased, and flicked her on the head. Honju Kade cried out, clutching her forehead, but there was no real pain. A system prompt flashed before her eyes. "Player Yuu has attacked you. You may freely counterattack." "Oh, right, this is in-game," she exclaimed, blinking and sheepishly scratching the back of her head. "I was planning to wait for you here, but I somehow fell asleep. I was teaching my mother something and lost track of time," she added lightly. Natsume Yuu stood and offered his hand with an apologetic smile. "It's okay. I saw your message was still unread, so I logged on to check. Hanju Kade accepted his hand and used it to haul herself up, paying little mind to his tardiness. Suddenly she brightened. "Oh, you, listen, after I put all my points into defense, those monsters didn't hurt me at all. Isn't that amazing?" She patted her flat chest and beamed, eyes sparkling as if she had a tail wagging behind her waiting for praise. "That's actually impressive. I'm surprised you thought of that," Natsume Yuu said genuinely. He wasn't just flattering a childhood friend. This build was genuinely unusual. The game was freeform, and players could allocate points any way they liked, but turning a whimsical idea into something that effectively made you into a mini-boss was rare. Right. Hanju Kade's smile widened until her eyes curved like crescents. "You, how did you get those clothes? They're so cool." She finally noticed his outfit. Compared to the coarse linen of most beginners, Natsume Yuu's gear matched the fanciful image she'd had of the game itself. Chapter 36, Section 36. "I got it by clearing that dungeon alone. You should try it later," Natsume Yuu said, turning to point toward the poison dragon maze. He wasn't sure whether it was a bug, but the prompt had only said unique equipment and hadn't said other players were barred from getting the drop if someone cleared it solo. He planned to have Hanjo Kade try it once to see if she could get the same set. "Clearing the boss solo? I wonder if I can do that." Hanju Kade's face creased as she thought about the requirement. "I believe you can, Maple," Natsume said calmly. His confidence eased the knot of anxiety in her. "Okay, I'll try it later," she declared, clenching her small hands into fists. "I've added you as a friend in-game. Accept it, Maple," she said with a smile, using his player name instead of his real name. Natsume smiled in return. He didn't want to reveal Hanju Kade's real-world identity, even if he personally didn't mind. "Oh, you, that means I don't have to change how I address you," she added, checking her friend list with a satisfied look. "Come on, I'll show you around," she said, and Natsume led the way toward town. Hanju Kade followed in quick, small steps, a smile blooming on her face. Things that had felt strange before became fun with someone beside her. She paused to inspect odd plants and darted over to examine them, then jumped when a monster suddenly appeared. She was about to hide behind Natsume, then remembered her current defense was ridiculously high and monsters couldn't hurt her. A sly smile spread over her face. She raised her shield and charged. Natsume watched from the side as she played. After a while, she seemed to feel guilty and tried to pull Natsume away instead of finishing off the monster, but she'd forgotten how slow her movement speed was. Natsume scooped her up and ran at full speed down the road. Other players leveling along the path glanced over, surprised by his speed, but mostly they smiled at the cheerful pair. The sound of their laughter mixed with birdsong in the forest, like the most beautiful music. Chapter 37. Contrast. Inside a cake shop in the beginner town, Hanju Kade covered one cheek with a hand and held her fork with the other, her face alight. "Wow! I can't believe they reproduced the taste so well. It's easy to make money in the game, and there are so many flavors. There's no worry about getting fat from eating too much. It's paradise." She swayed with excitement as she spoke. Natsume sat opposite her, smiling slightly, savoring the cake. So good," he murmured. "After being so serious for so long, a cup of black tea and dessert are really comforting." A soft, delighted voice came from the corner, no less amazed than Hanjo Kade. They both looked toward the far table and saw a woman with braided pigtails and glasses, eyes closed in bliss. Her expression matched Hanjo Kade's earlier one so much that Kade felt an instant kinship. The woman was so absorbed she didn't notice anyone staring. Seeing how content she was, Natsume and Kade decided not to disturb her. After a while, she opened her eyes, looked around, and relaxed when she saw no one had been watching her. Then she returned to enjoying her tea and cake, her face positively radiant. "That was perfect. I'll invite Risa to come after she finishes her exams," Hanju Kade said, patting her belly and smiling as if she'd eaten a feast. She'd only had 2 servings. She liked to keep some novelty, but it felt satisfying. Natsume was paying this time, and even though it was only in-game currency, Kade felt a little guilty about letting him spend too much. "Let's go. There's still time to look around," Natsume said, rising with a faint smile. "Okay," Kade replied, her steps light as they stood. She took one last glance at the woman in the corner, who had finished her cake and was sipping black tea to counter the sweetness. Then she fell into step beside Natsume. As they reached the door, a voice called out, full of surprise and recognition. "Brother, I didn't expect to see you here." Natsume turned and noticed a small group ahead led by a mage he recognized from earlier at the Poison Dragon Maze, one of the Flame Empire members. The lead mage hurried over. "That man is the expert I plan to invite into the guild this afternoon," the mage said earnestly. Mi Yi, the woman with the braided pigtails and glasses, followed the mage's gaze and realized the table he meant was the one nearest to hers. She had been the one savoring dessert. Seeing the exchange play out, she said quietly, "If they don't want to join, leave it be. Forcing them will only annoy them." The mage straightened and replied with respect, "Understood, Lady Mi Yi." "All right, we're done here. The official announcement is made. The first event is set for 3 days from now," the mage continued. "We should meet with Miserly and the others and decide the details." Mi Yi and the others turned and walked off. Honju Keide, who had been watching from behind them, followed at a distance, curiosity written all over her face. Suddenly, she grabbed Natsume's sleeve, eyes wide. "You, did you see that person just now?" Chapter 37, Section 37. A voice that commanded like a queen. Her fiery red cloak matched her shoulder-length hair. She looked like a living flame guiding people forward. It was hard to reconcile that image with the ordinary, soft-spoken woman who had been sitting in the shop earlier, eating dessert with a blissful expression and wearing plain gear. If he hadn't seen it himself, Natsume Yuya wouldn't have believed they were the same person. "People should have their private space to enjoy themselves," she had said. Yuya reached out and ruffled Honjo Kaide's head, rubbing it vigorously. "But isn't this just a game? Why the act?" Kaide tilted her head, her lively eyes sparkling. "All sorts of reasons," he shrugged. "Ugh, you're being performative." Her cheeks puffed out like a hamster storing food. "Ha-ha!" When he poked the puffed cheek, she immediately deflated like a pricked balloon. Yuya laughed and started walking. Kaide hadn't meant to press the issue further. She simply followed him with a cheerful smile. A routine that might have been boring, mundane conversations, the same small exchanges, felt colorful because of the people around him. Only one person was missing, because he had school the next day, and, thanks to his breathing technique, didn't need much sleep. Yuya could afford to stay up later. Kaide, however, couldn't handle it. So after wandering the town with her for a while, he said goodbye and logged out. He took off his gear and checked the time, already past 10:30. His phone flashed a green light. He picked it up, sat on the bed, and opened Shiramine Risa's messages. A flood of angry emoji stickers greeted him, clearly punishment for something he'd done earlier. Risa, who was normally diligent with her studies, was furious. Yuya chuckled softly, warmth in his eyes. He sent goodnight emoji stickers to both Risa and Kaide, then went to wash up without lingering. Passing Natsume Reiko's room, he paused to listen to the steady breathing from inside. She hadn't ignored what he'd said. After a quick wash and drying his hair, he went straight to bed. Chapter 38, Envy and Jealousy. The next morning, students in the same uniform filled the streets, walking in groups and chatting. Some were comparing yesterday's test scores, others were talking about the anime they'd watched the night before. A few pranksters darted away, laughing. The air was bright and lively from the start. You guy! As Yuya turned a corner, Shiramine Risa's voice called from up ahead. Even in uniform, she stood out. Her slender figure, the pleated skirt above long legs and white stockings, the quick tap-tap of her shoes, and a high brown ponytail swinging with every stride. A mischievous smile curled her lips. Honjo Keide, smaller by comparison, followed close behind, a sweet smile on her baby-faced cheeks. "Ha-ha! Sorry. As an apology, I'll buy you a drink at lunch." Yuya lifted both hands and laughed. "That's more like it." Risa, who had been charging toward him like an express train, immediately brightened. Her cheerfulness turned the heads of nearby students who had been waiting for a scene, only to shuffle away disappointed when there was none. This was no show. It was simply two people being affectionate in their own way. "Morning, you," Kaide said, used to the two of them occasionally bickering. "Morning," Yuya replied with a faint smile. "How was your game last night, Kaide?" Risa slung her backpack over one shoulder, curiosity written across her face. Good enough to surprise you. Yuya smiled mysteriously instead of answering outright. Risa cocked her head, looking puzzled at her friend. Ha! Kade puffed out her chest with a smug little nose sound. Risa's curiosity clawed at her like a cat. She edged closer, waiting for an explanation. Kade put all her starting points into defense. Risa blurted, shocked. She hadn't taught Kade how to allocate points because she wanted her to play as she liked. She'd never expected her to go so far. Are you serious? Well, that's just Kade, Yuya said, smiling. Risa thought of Kade's gentle, unadorned personality and immediately understood. You make me sound dumb, Risa. You haven't even taken the test yet, Kade grumbled. I was just saying Kade is really cute, right, you? Risa prompted, teasing. Kade turned red at the direct praise, like a kettle about to steam. You, are you taking part in the event the day after tomorrow? She asked, recovering. Risa stopped joking and chimed in. Despite her studying, she still kept an eye on game news. Of course, it's a server-wide event. The rewards will be good. Yuya wouldn't miss something that big. Naturally, I'm looking forward to playing. Risa looked at them both with thinly veiled envy and muttered, It's a good lesson. Maybe you'll stop neglecting your studies in the future. Kade, cheeks still flushed, huffed but conceded. I know I was wrong. Risa lowered her eyes, feeling she'd been too harsh before. The three of them walked on and reached the school gate. Before they stepped inside, a sleek black luxury car pulled up and the rear door opened. Yuki Asuna stepped out, impeccably dressed, breathtakingly beautiful, an aura of calm elegance about her. Chestnut hair fluttered in the cool morning breeze. She tilted her head, closed her eyes for a moment, and pressed a hand to hold her hair in place. Is this a new student? Someone nearby exclaimed. Chapter 38, Section 38. So beautiful. With a private car picking her up, she must be from a wealthy family. Amazing. I wonder if she has a boyfriend. The girl's arrival instantly made her the brightest star in the sky, drawing everyone's attention. This high school was one of the best in the area. Naturally, there were a few young masters and young ladies from prominent families. But a girl who combined such beauty, wealth, and a gentle demeanor, no one had seen anyone like her before. That young lady is so beautiful. Shiramine Risa nodded repeatedly as she watched the girl stride in the breeze. Indeed, Honju Kade agreed, her eyes sparkling. You two aren't bad either, Natsume Yuya said calmly. To him, the three girls' appearances weren't very different. Shiramine Risa was full of energy, Honju Kade was cute, and Yuki Asuna was gentle. It was her background that made Yuki Asuna stand out. Who didn't notice a lovely girl who arrived in a luxury car? Hearing Natsume Yuya's compliment, the two girls' faces lit up. They both knew Natsume didn't lie lightly. When he said something, he meant it. Even if they usually shrugged off praise, they couldn't help feeling pleased now. Yuki Asuna had also opened her eyes and taken in Natsume Yuya, who had two pretty girls at his side. Seeing someone she recognized, she returned a polite, gentle smile and nodded. Natsume Yuya, with a calm expression, gave a slight bow in return. Neither spoke. The gesture was enough. But the onlookers didn't see it as a simple greeting. Who is that guy? He has two beautiful girls, and he knows that young lady. Look at his tie. He must be a new student, too. He's this year's freshman representative. He studies well and knows so many pretty girls. Damn it! The chattering turned into a roar. Envious and jealous looks came from the boys around them. Natsume Yuya remained unbothered. His indifferent expression only made some of the boys grind their teeth in irritation. Chapter 39. The Effect of the Breathing Technique. The commotion at the entrance was quieted by the teacher on duty, and the students began filtering toward the school building. A few lingering glances, like thorns in the back, remained for a while. I almost bumped into her around the corner yesterday, Natsume Yuya said calmly, feeling the two curious gazes next to him. Is that so? Shiramine Risa pouted. This was less exciting than she had imagined. Their interaction had been too casual to suggest they were very close. Yuki Asuna. I'd heard of her, but this is the first time I've seen her. And in the exams, I think she ranked just below you, Honju Kade added, tapping her chin. Ordinary students might not remember who got second place, but since Natsume Yuya always took first, she'd sometimes paid attention to whoever came second. Being dropped off in a luxury car every day was bound to spark gossip. She'd heard classmates talking, but hadn't seen Asuna in person until now. "So she's an honor student, but seems pretty normal," Shiramine Risa said, recalling their brief meeting and concluding that Asuna looked like a genuinely good girl. "I'll head in then." Natsume Yuya walked toward his class's shoe lockers as the two finished their discussion. "Okay, see you this afternoon. Don't forget our drinks." The girls waved and called after him. After changing into his indoor shoes, Natsume Yuya calmly walked into the classroom. He felt the stares even more strongly than the previous day, but no one approached him. He took his usual window seat in the back, rested his chin on his hand, and looked out the window. Then his consciousness summoned the chat group. The group was lively. Kato Megumi, Chitanda Eru, and Doma Umaru were all discussing the effects of the breathing technique. It was only their first practice. They couldn't exactly say they'd mastered it yet, only that they were imitating step by step, but the results were surprising. They woke up feeling energetic, no longer groggy after a night's sleep. The improvements had them amazed. "Do you guys feel like your appetite has increased?" Chitanda Eru, wearing a thin pink jacket over a long white dress, had a flushed face as she nervously glanced around. A heavy dining table sat before her, its plates cleared. But Chitanda alone knew she had eaten 3 large bowls of rice for breakfast, an impossible amount for her usual appetite. Previously, 1 bowl of rice and some side dishes was enough. "I think so, too. I was worried about gaining weight, but I was so hungry I had to eat." Doma Umaru felt a little embarrassed recalling breakfast. Maybe the body is digesting food faster? Megumi had noticed the same change and, having done some research, offered a guess. As Megumi said, that's normal. The breathing technique can promote absorption and quickly strengthen your body and life energy. So there's no need to worry about getting fat. Morning. Good morning, you. Good morning. When Natsume Yuya appeared in the group, the 3 greeted him quickly. They'd been reluctant to at him in the morning and wake him if he wasn't fully awake. No one liked being startled at sunrise. Morning. Is Kanai not up yet? Seeing only Kato Megumi and the other 2 in the chat, Natsume asked, a little puzzled. Chapter 39, Section 39. There were a lot of messages in the group chat between the 4 of them. He didn't want to read them all one by one. Chitanda Eru wrote, "Kanai said Master is back and she has to go to a meeting." Even with no school, Chitanda still woke early every day like a proper young lady, doing light exercises and practicing the new breathing technique. She'd kept a simple line of contact with Butterfly Kanai. Natsume Yuu narrowed his eyes at the message and tapped his fingers on the table. Ubuyashiki's back? If he managed to bring the Kamado family here, then their move can't be far off. With Tanjiro Kamado's guidance, the exceptionally talented might get a chance to grasp the transparent world. The mark and the crimson blade would depend on their own efforts. Still, even if the Pillar's training advanced quickly, Natsume Yuu suspected they'd focus first on hunting down lone demons, particularly the isolated upper moons. The current generation of Pillars was few. If they didn't reduce Muzan's top-end strength now, the final fight would be impossible to win. How soon they acted would hinge on the Pillar's progress. Judging by their talent, Natsume Yuu estimated it would take about a month. Doma Umaru pinged, "Are we going to keep eating this much?" Kato Megumi replied, "This is okay, but any more would be a bit much." Unlike Chitanda, who came from a wealthy family, Doma and Kato were from ordinary households. Eating too extravagantly would put a strain on their families. Natsume Yuu answered, "Once your understanding of the breathing technique deepens and your conditioning reaches a certain level, your breathing will start to generate energy, replenishing the body's consumption. Your appetite will then return to normal." He juggled that explanation while thinking about Butterfly Kanai and responding quickly in the chat. Kato wrote, "That's good." Doma cheered. "In that case, I can drink as much cola as I want for now." She pictured herself happily downing cola and chips and nearly drooped onto the table from excitement, stifling a few coughs to avoid drawing attention at school. Morning classes passed slowly, as the four kept up a steady exchange. Although they chatted, they breathed at controlled rhythms, the new breathing technique accelerating digestion of foods that weren't fully processed, converting them into useful nutrients and distributing them through the body. Their conditioning subtly improved. Faster sprints, higher jumps, more strength, tougher skin. The progress was gradual but constant. Butterfly Kanai didn't show up in the morning. Kato, Doma, and Chitanda all worried, especially after that livestream night had left such a deep impression. At noon, while eating boxed lunches with Shiramine Risa and Hanju Keide, and still half chatting with the others, Natsume Yuu saw Kane finally appear in the group. Butterfly. Good afternoon, everyone. Kane, how did it go? Chitanda and Kato froze with the messages they were about to send. They were all anxious. Butterfly Kane's reply came bright and excited. Master successfully invited the Kamado family. Mr. Kamado agreed to guide us. Kanai had just left Ubuyashiki's estate and was practically beaming with the news. The Kasugai Crow had told her that Kagaya Ubuyashiki had returned. She'd rushed over and found, besides Ubuyashiki's family and the Flame Pillar, a modestly dressed family of 2 adults and 5 children. The father looked gaunt and coughed now and then, which had made Kanai think, briefly and unconsciously, of Natsume Yuu. From the mark on their foreheads, she immediately knew they were the Kamados. Ubuyashiki had hidden them away to prevent Muzan from showing up, traveling with extreme discretion, which explained the delay in news. Chitanda couldn't hide her delight. That's wonderful, Doma asked eagerly. Your strength should increase a lot, right? Kato tempered the excitement with a reminder. Even if your strength grows, there are still the 12 demon moons and countless other demons. The numbers matter. Doma admitted, compared to the future, our current top-tier combat power is still a bit lacking. Kanai answered, determined. After this training, we'll try to take out some lone upper moons. How many depends on our luck. They all understood the risk. Targeted attacks would draw Muzan's attention, who might gather forces or set traps. But this situation was already better than the original timeline. Natsume Yuu thought silently that their plan matched what he'd suspected. Kanai added, we also plan to invite Miss Tamayo. Natsume, you mean to develop the poison from the original story? Kanai confirmed, yes, Miss Tamayo's poison is important. The plan was clear. Use Tamayo's medicine to age Muzan rapidly, 50 years per minute in some versions, and prevent him from self-destructing. Combined with Natsume Yuu's blood, this could give them a fighting chance even with fewer high-level fighters than in the future. How exactly they would administer the poison wasn't discussed. Everyone had prepared to make sacrifices. Natsume Yuu wasn't overly optimistic. Tamayo's medicines were powerful across many worlds, but in the original timeline, there were still several years before the decisive battle. Whether such poisons could be developed now, so far in advance, remained uncertain. Chapter 40, Section 40. Natsume Yuu kept the thought to himself. With everyone united and working together, maybe a miracle could happen. There's still time, he said. If the chat group enables the world-traveling function by then, I can go over. After learning that demon bloodline, my strength increased a lot, he added. Dealing with Kibutsuji Muzan shouldn't be a problem. 2 nights ago, he had learned a demon bloodline. His body had become much stronger. Combined with the effects of the breathing technique, his physique and chi grew stronger every day. Compared to the innumerable illnesses eating away at him, it was still small progress, but enough, he felt, to stand against Muzan. The demon bloodline's self-healing, the instant recovery from serious wounds, might also help him fight the sickness gnawing at his insides. Travel between worlds. Kato Megumi's pulse quickened at Natsume Yuu's remark. She had joined the group and taken on supernatural abilities more as a fantasy, but the idea of actual world hopping, of seeing a different world with her own eyes, lit a new kind of excitement in her. Chitanda Eru, naturally curious, watched with her violet eyes shining. Doma Umaru looked up at the teacher and suddenly widened her eyes, fists clenching as she fought to keep her excitement in check. Butterfly Kanae, however, was more concerned about Natsume Yuu's strength than the other's surprise. She didn't doubt his talent. This was the boy who had learned the breathing technique by watching it, who had combined it with knowledge from his own world and upgraded the art. He could activate a mark and a transparent world, things countless people hadn't understood even after a lifetime, and he had even learned a demon bloodline. He seemed like some prodigious anomaly. But Kanae also knew that talent alone meant nothing if the body couldn't support it. The mark, the transparent world, even the highest natural gifts needed a strong physical base. If the gap was too wide, no amount of talent could be translated into real, usable power. Natsume paused, then said quietly, "I don't think I mentioned this before. After I learned the Lower Moon 3 bloodline, my body improved a lot. In terms of raw physical strength, I can easily shatter a 2-meter wide rock." Before he learned the breathing technique, he'd browsed and practiced martial arts from his world, mastering many techniques. That gave him extraordinary body control and an instinct for how far his strength could go. When the breathing technique and the demon bloodline were layered on top, his power leapt forward. He had a rough sense of the destructive force he now carried. Butterfly Kanae fell silent for a moment, remembering how frightened she had been that his demon bloodline might force him to feed on humans to sustain itself. That fear had made her overlook just how much stronger he had become. Kato Megumi, half joking, murmured, "Looking back, I guess I only cared about whether you would start eating people." Even mentally prepared as she was, Doma Umaru felt a wave of suffocation at the scale of it. They had all joined the chat group from ordinary worlds, yet in 2 or 3 days, Natsume Yuu had developed enough strength to face someone like Kibutsuji Muzan. Doma herself could only perform the breathing technique intermittently. Her version wasn't optimized. Natsume had refined the technique. Without his modifications, by the standards of the Demon Slayer Corps, she probably wouldn't even qualify to learn it. And if there were other, stronger worldviews in the group, his growth might accelerate even more. Chitanda, after a quick mental calculation, concluded aloud, "With chi amplification, he really does have the ability to fight." "You is amazing," she declared. Butterfly Kanae sighed, then smiled warmly. "In just 2 or 3 days his strength reached this level? That's incredible. Is your health getting better?" Natsume nodded. "It's improving." He took a bite of rice and chewed slowly, his eyes deep. The demon bloodline's recovery and enhanced constitution made him feel steadier, but the illnesses were not gone. If anything, he suspected there was more than mundane disease inside him. With his current regenerative ability and strength, a normal terminal illness would have already healed. That suggested something else was at work. There are only tens of thousands of illnesses in the world, and far fewer that are truly fatal, he thought. In that billions of illnesses, there must be a lot of supernatural stuff, death curses, things that treat death as a concept. If so, my soul could be full of holes too. He'd suspected as much for a long time, but before he'd had no way to fight back, there was no reason to dwell on it. Now that he had a fighting chance, the thought resurfaced. The image of the Huatuo 3-panel meme made him smile despite himself. It had been a teasing joke at his expense for years, and he'd learned to live with it. Still, he refused to let the joke define him. The original 100% death ending had already shifted to 99.99%, still almost inevitable, but not absolute. As long as there's a chance, however small, I'll take it, he told himself. I'll break that damn certain death ending. His pale violet eyes shone with resolve. He didn't spend much time on the origin of the illness. It might be the work of a god, or the rejection from traveling between worlds, or something else entirely. Unlike Nanami Yasuri, he wasn't an existence native to this world. Perhaps that had triggered some kind of backlash. But if a god was involved,